Welcome to Malifaux University. 303. Choosing a faction, leader, and a crew. The table is set. You've got a strategy, a deployment zone, and a scheme pool. It's time to get your models together. I know, when you're just starting out, you may have only a handful of models. That will keep this step pretty simple. The longer you play or more time you spend online, the more you'll see players who collect every model in a given faction, every model with a certain keyword, or both. While expensive and time-consuming to acquire, build, and paint all these models, it does provide maximum flexibility in building your crews. It may be something you work toward as you get into the game, but don't let trying to build the ideal crew stop you from playing the game, because there's no such thing as an ideal crew for every situation. After the scheme pool is determined by the attacker flipping cards or by the Crew Builder app, each player declares a faction to play in the encounter. In all but the most competitive of situations, you probably both come to the table with at least a faction in mind already, but this is the time to make that decision official and declare it to your opponent. Once you both name a faction, you then take a moment to select a leader for your crew from that faction. If you have just a starter box, you may not even have a master model. That's okay. You can select a henchman model as your crew's leader. When you do, that henchman gets the perks of being a leader, like immunity from any attack that says non-leader only, and getting 3 actions on his activation instead of just 2 if you're playing a 50 Soulstone game or larger. If you do select a henchman as the leader, there are a couple of limitations on your crew. First, you cannot hire a master into your crew if a henchman is the leader. I know, if you had a master model, why would you select a henchman as the leader? Maybe you really want to mix things up in your crew and surprise your opponent. Masters have standards, however, and they won't deign to work for a mere henchman. The second limit is regarding totems. Totems are linked to their masters. If the master is not in the crew, you cannot hire the totem for that master. Some totems are henchmen, however, and could serve as the crew's leader. Take a look at the Dreamer and Lord Chompybits. The Dreamer is a Neverborn master, and Lord Chompybits is his totem. The Carver is a Neverborn henchman, so I could select the Carver as my crew's leader. If I do that, though, I cannot hire the Dreamer because a master will not work for a henchman. I also cannot hire Lord Chompybits because he is Dreamer's totem and won't join a crew without the Dreamer. I could select Lord Chompybits as my crew's leader since he is a henchman, and then hire the Carver because there's nothing against having more than one henchman in a crew, but then I wouldn't be able to hire the Dreamer because a master won't work for a henchman. Once both players have privately selected their leaders, they'll both reveal their leaders' names to each other, but not that leader's title, if any. The titles can greatly alter the game mechanics and methods of the leader, so consider them carefully before choosing a titled master. Some of them simplify the master, but most titles make them more challenging to play. The Leader Analysis 1000 series of videos can help you decide which version of a model is right for you. Now that both players have revealed their leaders, they need to make another secret choice. Unless you're playing in a tournament or some other form of organized play where the person making the rules has said you can't, you now decide whether or not you will hire additional master models into your crew. Obviously, this is an option only if you have a master as the leader of your crew already. If you're going to hire additional master models, you have to choose to do so now and name them specifically. Keep in mind that the total combined cost of the additional masters you select must be less than half the encounter size, but the master you hired as your crew leader is still free. Once both players have made these choices, they reveal their choices to hire additional masters or not, and who those masters are if so. With a faction, a leader, and possibly additional masters declared, it's time to hire a crew. The size of the game determines how many Soulstones worth of models you can hire. It doesn't matter if you choose a master or a henchman as your leader, that model is free. If your leader is a master, you may hire its totem for free as well. Back to that Dreamer example. When the Dreamer leads a crew, his 15 soulstone cost is ignored. He can also bring Lord Chompybits, an 8 soulstone henchman, for free, since he's the Dreamer's totem. If the Carver were the leader of the crew, the Carver's 10 soulstone cost would be free, but he still wouldn't be allowed to hire Lord Chompybits or the Dreamer. There is a model in every faction known as an effigy. We won't get into the lore behind the effigies and emissaries, but for our purposes right now, you just need to know that every effigy has the Helping Hand ability, which says if you hire a henchman as your crew leader, you can hire the effigy for free, kinda like a totem. Also, watch out for models that have a When Hiring ability on their cards. You can search for this by typing it into the search line in the Crew Builder app. These models have special rules that apply to how they are hired. As your skills in crew building develop over time, these may become more important to you. When hiring models, you have 2 pools from which you can hire. The first are keywords. About 90% of the time, the keywords are contained in a single faction, which makes for crews with a single theme and vibe to them. The other pool is the faction. As discussed in a previous video, you can hire any model within your leader's faction, but if it doesn't have at least one keyword that matches the leader, then you have to add 1 to the soulstone cost. The exception to this is a model with the versatile characteristic. Versatile models in the same faction as the leader may be hired at no penalty. Jacob Lynch is a 10 Thunders master with the Honeypot keyword. Nearly all the other Honeypot keyword models are also 10 Thunders models. If Jacob wants to hire the Soul Battery, which is an enforcer in the Outcast faction, he may do so because the Soul Battery has the Honeypot keyword. The faction doesn't matter. If Jacob wants to stay within the 10 Thunders faction and hire Bill Algren, Bill's soulstone cost would be 10, because even though Bill is a 10 Thunders model, he doesn't have the Honeypot keyword or the versatile characteristic. Jacob may want to really mix things up and hire a doppelganger into his crew because she's also a versatile enforcer. Despite her versatility, Jacob cannot hire her, even at a penalty, because she's not in the 10 Thunders faction and does not have the Honeypot keyword. One famous example of a diverse crew is the Crossroads 7. This all-henchman crew has a 7 Deadly Sins rock band theme. Even though each model in this crew is from a different faction, they all have the Crossroads keyword. To play them, you'd declare one of their 7 factions as your faction, and that model as the crew's leader. Let's pick the Outcast model, Pride, as the faction and leader. If we hire the rest of the crew as is, that's 42 soulstones, because Pride would be free. In a 50 soulstone game, we have 8 to spare. Since we declared Outcasts as the faction, we could hire any Outcast model we wanted, but add a +1 to its cost if it doesn't have the versatile characteristic. One more example you may come across. Look at the Puppet keyword. If you wanted to build an all-puppet crew, you'd have 2 options for a leader. Hinamatsu is a Neverborn henchman with both the Puppet and Chi and Gong keywords. But look at the Widow Weaver. She's a Neverborn henchman with the Nightmare keyword and the Nightmare Tailor ability that says she is treated as having the Puppet keyword when hiring. Tricky, right? Let's stick with Hinamatsu. If you type Puppet into the search bar of the Crew Builder app, the results will be quite chromatic. Even though Hinamatsu is a Neverborn henchman, all these other models have the Puppet keyword, and she can hire any of them at no penalty, even though many of them are not Neverborn. That includes the 10 Thunders Bunraku, the Arcanist Coryphes and Mannequin, and the Neverborn Redcap, Stitched Together, Vasilisa, Wicked Dolls, and Widow Weaver, along with the effigy model from every faction. Hinamatsu cannot hire the Voodoo Doll because that is Zoraita's totem and won't join a crew without her in it. Hinamatsu can also hire any versatile Neverborn model at its regular cost, or any other Neverborn model at the +1 penalty. Notice that a couple of models have gray colors to their names and cards. These are the Dead Man's Hand, models that existed in previous editions of Malifaux but were written out of the story along the way. They have current 3rd edition rules on their cards in case they are written back into the story, but unless you and your opponent are playing a friendly game that allows Dead Man's Hand models, you cannot hire these models into any crew. If you've declared you're hiring additional master models into your crew, you must follow through with that decision. Keep in mind that there are no masters with the versatile characteristic as of the time of this video, and regular hiring rules still apply. Without a keyword in common with your crew's leader, the additional masters must belong to the same faction as your leader and will add 1 to their soulstone costs when hiring. The master you chose as your crew's leader is still free and does not get added to this total. The real limiting factor on whether you can hire additional masters is the size of your game. If you're playing a 25 soulstone game, half of that is exactly 12.5, rounded up to 13. If you're playing Outcasts and have chosen Victoria Chambers as your crew leader, you could hire her sister for free due to their Ashes and Blood ability. Or if you're using any other Outcast master, you could bring 1 Victoria Chambers for 12 soulstones. A 10 Thunders crew could also hire Jacob Lynch at this level, but for 12 soulstones, since he doesn't share a keyword with any other 10 Thunders master. Since most games are played at the 50 soulstone level, the combined total of the additional master models could, at most, be 24 soulstones, since half the game size is 25. Remember what we said about other games having dozens of the same model, and that in Malifaux every model is a unique character model? This means that usually you can hire only 1 of a given model. I might have the original Teddy model and this Miss Eerie model, which is an alternate sculpt of Teddy, but I can hire only 1 of them since they count as the same model. Some models, however, have less character than others, and you actually can hire more than 1 of them. Several minions have a number in parentheses after their station characteristics. That's how many of that model you're allowed to have in the game at one time, either through hiring at the start of the game or later through summoning or some other means. The limit for most models with this characteristic ranges from 2 to 5, but Bayou Gremlins have 8 and Malifaux Rats have 12. The only non-minions to have this quality are Victoria Chambers, the Outcast Master, who has a twin who can be on the table at the same time, and the titled version of the Explorer Society Master, Nexus. Nexus, one of many, has the Many Voices ability that lets it hire 2 additional copies of itself at no cost. An example of this hiring restriction in play can be seen with the Widow Weaver. She has a Careful Assembly tactical action that allows her to summon a Neverborn minion with the Puppet keyword. The Wicked Doll is one such model, and it has a hiring limit of 3. If there are already 3 Wicked Dolls on the table, Widow Weaver would not be able to summon a 4th, but could summon a different Puppet keyword minion like a Redcap. If one of these Wicked Dolls were killed, she could then summon a new one to replace the killed one, because she wouldn't have more than 3 on the table at one time. There are options for attaching upgrades to the models you hire, but these are more advanced ways of playing with your models, giving them extra abilities and special rules. When you're just starting out, I recommend you leave the upgrades for a later game and focus on what's on your cards right now. Finally, any soulstones left over after hiring your crew become your Soulstone Pool. These are the soulstones you get to use during the game for shenanigans. Some crews rely on soulstones more heavily than others, so it will take some experimentation for you to discover the right number for you and your crew. You should probably start out with 3 or 4 and adjust up or down from there. No matter what, the maximum number of soulstones you may have in your pool at the beginning of the game is 10. I'll take a brief moment now to thank all those who were patrons at the time this video was made, especially Griff, Sergey, Tom, Alan, Jeremy, Mikolai, and Travis, and many more at the free student tier. Your support is essential to bringing these videos to life. If you're using the Malifaux Crew Builder app to build your crew, here's how it works. Tap Crews from the Start menu and tap the plus sign at the bottom right. All the faction icons will line up on the side of the screen. Select the faction you want. We'll pick Arcanists. The next menu that appears lists all the masters and henchmen eligible to lead a crew in this faction. Let's select Master Colette Dubois. When you tap her name, a box will appear asking which version of Colette you want, the regular untitled model or the titled version, which for Colette is Smuggler. Let's select the untitled version. As soon as we do, she's hired into our crew for free, along with all 3 of her mechanical dove totems. We still have 50 soulstones to go, but you can adjust that number to match the size of your game by tapping on Soulstone's left and adjusting the slider. Let's leave it at 50. There are 2 tabs at the top of this screen. View shows you the crew you're building. Hire shows you all the models you could still select. In the Hire tab, you'll see that the Henchman and Minion bars are solid blue, while the Master and Enforcer bars are multicolored. This means there are models in other factions available to hire. Opening up the Master bar shows all the other Arcanist Master models available. Naturally, none of them share a keyword with Colette, so they are all listed as out of keyword and show the +1 penalty. As previously discussed, you can hire additional Master models into your crew only if you already have a Master as your crew's leader, you previously declared and revealed to your opponent your intent to hire the additional Masters, and the encounter is sufficiently large enough to make it mathematically possible. Under Enforcers, we see there is a Neverborn model, Dorian Crow, and an Explorer Society model, Harada Na Toro, with the Performer keyword. Though they are not Arcanists, Colette can hire either of them with no penalty. Under every section, you will see the models in keyword listed first, then the versatile models, and then the rest of the out-of-keyword models, though you can change how they are sorted by tapping here. To see any model's card, tap on its name, and the card appears. Swipe left to see the back of the card. To hire a model, simply tap the plus sign to the left of its name. You'll see the model's name flicker as it is added to your crew, but the plus sign will remain until you reach that model's hiring limit. For most models, hiring it once will turn the plus sign into a check mark. If you hire multiples of the same model, they will be listed with numbers after their names, such as Mechanical Dove 2, and Mechanical Dove 3. Their cards will reflect the unique art of each model sculpt, but it's up to you to keep them straight on the table. It is bad sportsmanship and poor playing to accidentally mix up which model has been taking damage or was killed. If the sculpts of the models are too similar, you may wish to mark their bases with their numbers to eliminate confusion. Also, you can change the cards in your app to match the models you want to put on the table with the drop-down menu at the top of the model stat card. This is handy when you're using official alternate sculpts or fewer than the maximum number allowed of a model. For instance, if I were building the Dark Carnival version of the Performer crew, Baritone Lola counts as Cassandra Felton. I could swap the 2 cards by selecting the name in the menu. Looking at the Showgirl, when I hire just 2, the default is Showgirl and Showgirl 2. Opening up their card in the drop-down menu shows there are many more Showgirl models than one could possibly hire into one crew. I can switch that out for Showgirl 4, a limited edition model, and Thin Lizzy, who counts as a Showgirl, if these are the 2 I am putting on the table. If you are using a proxy, where a model stands in place of another model that it wasn't intended for, you'll just have to remember that and make sure your opponent both understands and agrees with the proxy. If you decide you don't want a model in your crew, just swipe its name to the right and it will be removed. The number of soulstones you have remaining adjusts automatically as you add or remove models. Once you have settled on your crew, save it and give it a name if you wish. Note that the arrows to the left of each model's name are for assigning upgrades to those models. Tapping an arrow will reveal the available upgrades, so once you've played a few games and gotten used to how your models normally work, you should be ready to start playing with upgrades. This player recommends you do your crew building in advance, long before you play a game with a crew. Advanced players may know the ins and outs of their models well enough to create a well-synchronized crew on the fly. Beginning players should take the time to build well-thought-out crews and save them all. Make a crew that specializes in melee attacks, a crew with an emphasis on ranged attacks, and a crew especially good at running around the board. Make versions of each of these at 50, 40, and 30 soulstones. Consider how removing one significant model leads you to make other decisions for remaining models. Learn how your models interact and coordinate with one another, and build crews to capitalize on those strengths. Eventually, add in a versatile model or two. Again, when you're starting out, you may have enough models for only one crew. Building creative crews in advance can lead you to buy models on purpose and with certain methods in mind. You may discover interesting new ways of using models together that surprises your opponent and you. Back in the game you created, you'll see blocks for Crew 1 and Crew 2. By default, you are Crew 1 and your opponent is Crew 2. Tap Crew 1 and then select the crew you just created or any other crew you previously made, as long as it aligns with the faction and leader you already declared. Take note that next to the two crew tabs are a sword and a shield emblem. These icons indicate which player is the attacker and which is the defender. If you're not playing your game with the network option, you'll need to share your crew and import your opponent's crew. From the 3 bars to the right of your crew's name, select Share. Use QR code to create a graphic embedded with your crew's information. Your opponent will select Crew 2 on her app and then tap the QR code icon in the top right corner. After scanning your code, your crew will appear in the proper place in her app. Duplicate this process in reverse to import your opponent's crew into your app. That's the overview of choosing a faction, leader, and a crew. Pick up a printable set of all the markers and tokens you need to play Malifaux in the Wargames Vault. If you haven't already, join our Patreon for early, ad-free access to all new content. And be sure to visit the Malifaux University gift shop for the latest in Malifaux-themed shirts, hoodies, drinkware, and more. Links are in the notes below. And remember, play friendly games, keep it simple, and have fun.